If I were to say to you, Western culture is under threat from mass migration and a lack of integration by certain ethnic and cultural groups, and you agreed with that, it might alarm you to learn that that is part of the definition of extreme right-wing terrorist ideologies according to Prevent, which is an organization designed to prevent the radicalization of individuals with terrorist ideologies. The emphasis is mine. I'll come back to that in a moment. But if I were also to say to you that an Afghan asylum seeker has just been sentenced to 12 years in prison for raping a 15-year-old girl and still doesn't accept that he's done anything wrong, that would be a statement of fact. So what separates that statement and story of fact from a terrorist ideology? Well, according to the definition here, that would be advocating discrimination or violence against minority groups, which I certainly wouldn't do, and I hope that you wouldn't do either. But what is really alarming is that within that definition, they include this bit about cultural nationalism. The emphasis is mine. Western culture under threat from mass migration and a lack of integration by certain ethnic and cultural groups. Now, you might agree, based on the story that I'm going to tell you about in just a moment, you might agree that our culture is under threat from mass migration because of the lack of integration by certain ethnic and cultural groups. Because I will show you the story in just a moment. This Prevent definition I dealt with in greater detail because I believe that it's a risk to free speech in this video here of mine, which I'll link below. Please do subscribe, by the way, help my channel grow. That I really appreciate. But let's take a look at this story here, because this is a man, forgive the voice, by the way, I've got a bit of a cold right now, but I will fight through. This is a man who raped a 15-year-old girl after following her on a street in Scotland. He's been jailed, it says been jailed for 9 years. 9 years is the time that he's going to spend in prison. The sentence is 12 years, of which he will spend 9 years in prison. He was 29 years old, targeted this girl in the town centre. He's from Afghanistan, seeking asylum, repeatedly requested her telephone number, uttered sexual remarks, led her into a courtyard, and then raped her. However, when you look at the Crown Office website for Scotland, it says that he led her into a courtyard where he subjected her to a serious sexual assault. You might find that it was rape, not just a serious sexual assault. Of course, it is a form of sexual assault, but I, for one, would appreciate the actual facts so that we're not playing anything down here. I think this is one of the most horrendous, heinous, vulgar, and nasty crimes that anybody can inflict upon each other. That you do get my views about, and I make no apology for giving you those views. So I firmly believe that these should attract the most severe sentences across the board, and if it is found that someone is guilty of this offence, they should absolutely go to prison for an extended period of time. That is my opinion, and I make no apology for saying it. Some have argued that not all offenders should spend any time in prison. I don't agree with that, frankly. Let's move on. The Judiciary website for Scotland reports as follows. At the High Court in Livingston, Judge John Morris KC sentenced Sadiq Niqzad to an extended sentence after the offender was convicted of raping a 15-year-old girl. The custodial term set at 9 years, whilst the extension period served under supervision in the community was 3 years. So he's on a further licence period of 3 years, and he's to be placed on the sexual offenders register indefinitely. But I also have to say that I don't have a huge amount of confidence in that whole system, given that it was reported a few years ago that the police lost track of over 900 sex offenders because they changed their name. So to put it bluntly, what chance do they have with an Afghan asylum seeker who might seek to evade the system by changing his name or just disappearing? We heard of one reported yesterday who's fled the country. On the one hand, we call for deportation. On the other hand, they're fleeing the country. So we hear all sorts of things. But the judge goes on. Mr. Niqzad, he says, whilst I appreciate that you do not accept that you've done anything wrong, the fact remains that you've been convicted of an extremely serious sexual offence against a child. In the circumstances, only a substantial custodial sentence is appropriate in your case. Also, I must ensure that the public is adequately protected against serious harm from you when you are eventually released from prison. For those reasons, I'm going to pass on you what is called an extended sentence. Such a sentence has two parts. First, the custodial part, and the second, after he's released on licence. Now, of course, this is in Scotland. Things are very slightly different there, but that was the sentence there. This has quite rightly caught the attention of MPs. This is a clip from Chris Philp. After which, and later in the video, I'll talk about other stories where I do believe that our own culture is under attack from stories that I read in the news. So first of all, listen to this short clip from Chris Philp here.
We see reports of migrants based in hotels being charged with serious crimes, including rape and sexual assaults on women and children. Louise Casey has warned that a significant proportion of sexual offences are committed by those seeking asylum. Cases like 29-year-old Afghan Sadiq Nikzad, convicted of raping a 15-year-old girl. His defence counsel claimed he did not understand this was wrong due to cultural differences. This madness has to stop.
And so that quite definitively says that some of these offenders do not know that there are cultural differences, or that they are using it as an excuse that they do not know that there are cultural differences. And either way, still maintained that he'd done nothing wrong. So coming back to the original definition here, where it says Western culture is under threat from mass migration and lack of integration, etc., many people will agree with that. But you must stop short of advocating discrimination or violence, because otherwise you will be labelled a right-wing extremist terrorist of sorts. So whilst the view itself might be supported by news items, I have to urge caution for you not to say certain things online where you might be accused of advocating violence, which may now be chalked up as a terrorist ideology. And so in a moment, a couple of stories about how our own culture appears to be being eroded by our own institutions, which you may have come across in the news, and how it appears that our own law is not protecting our own borders. Back with those in just a moment, but first a word about one of my partners. In other legal news, there is a massive story broken where there's a 10-week trial convicted 8 men after a huge investigation into stealing data. Officers went on to seize and analyse 4.5 million documents, 144,000 spreadsheets, 241,000 emails, 1.5 million images, and 83,000 other mixed multimedia files on a number of different crimes over several years. Now, what does this all have to do with you, and why am I telling you about this in the middle of a video? Well, this now means that your data might end up on the dark web somewhere. Because if it wasn't obvious, these men were collecting this information to sell it on to data brokers, marketers, or people that were trying to impersonate you. It's personal identity theft. Now, these end up on databases somewhere, part of the dark web, where they are bought and sold, and you need to be alert to that. So NordVPN, as a partner to my channel, will alert you to any of your data that is leaked onto the dark web somewhere. There is a panel on there that will flag up where your data is found on the dark web, so you can go and investigate it and try to get it removed. As well as providing you anonymity online and protecting you from malicious websites, malicious downloads, this is often an overlooked feature of NordVPN to scour the dark web for your personal data. And after a case like this, it's absolutely worth it. And of course, as a partner to my channel, I get you a great discount, which is 4 months extra free off the plan using the code BBB. Just go to the link nordvpn.com/BBB and make sure that code's applied and you'll get your great discount. Of course, you also get a money back guarantee, but for less than the price of a cup of coffee, it is absolutely worth it to find out if your data is on the dark web somewhere. Sign up, check it out, and thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. So back to these stories and the daily gaslighting. Keir Starmer says he's working day and night to secure our borders, smash the gangs, and make Britain a fairer, more secure country. But that's not quite true, because as you can see from the daily statistics, which I'm still not convinced includes absolutely everything, but you can see from the latest 4 days of statistics alone, that is 1,375 new migrants in just 4 days. Bearing in mind that it only takes one, such as this guy here, to completely ruin a young girl's life, and still doesn't accept that he did anything wrong. Now, nobody can tell me that that is anything close to acceptable. But nonetheless, moving on, Keir Starmer also says British people have every right to ask why their money is spent on asylum hotels instead of public services. That's why he says I agreed a groundbreaking pilot with France. For the first time, people who try to make the crossing illegally will find themselves back where they started. But reports suggest that this only applies to 50 people or so a week, and it's a net zero return because it's a one-in, one-out deal, so net zero will actually be returned, and they refuse to commit to how many numbers, when it will start, or what it will achieve. And so we have Suella Braverman shooting back, saying, "You're about to open a new asylum accommodation in my constituency. You're full of nonsense," she says. And I think the sentiment is shared by a lot of people. And I think nonsense was probably not the word that came to most people's mind. And so this is just proof that this is just gaslighting, telling people what he thinks that they want to hear, but it's not backed up in actual fact and reality, as is the case with the statistics and with the stories that we read, such as this chap here, who, for emphasis, still doesn't agree that he's done anything wrong. Moving on, you've probably seen and read about this girl and the degradation of the culture of our own country here. Now again, I think it's really bizarre that I have to say this or report on this, but her school was said, in fact the letter is here, that they were excited to inform their pupils and parents that Bilton School will be celebrating Culture Day on Friday the 11th of July. This special day is dedicated to recognising and celebrating rich cultural diversity within the school community. Accordingly, Courtney Wright, who is 12 years old and a straight A student, decided to wear the Union Jack to celebrate British culture because she's a British girl. They said it was reminiscent of the Spice Girls and wanted to celebrate British culture at the school on Culture Day. However, the school decided that was not acceptable. The school officials told her that her outfit was not acceptable, took her out of class, put her in isolation, and sent her home. Her father was called to come and retrieve her from school, and he said that she should not be made to feel embarrassed about being British. Somebody at the school has politicised a Union Jack dress, even though that was clearly not Courtney's intent. Courtney didn't do anything to be political. What followed was a slightly bizarre and somewhat contradictory statement from a spokesperson for Stowe Valley Trust, which reportedly said as follows: "At Bilton School, we are proud of the diversity of our students and the rich heritage they bring to our community. We are committed to fostering an environment where every pupil feels respected, valued, and included. On Friday, the 11th of July, an incident occurred during our cultural celebration day that caused considerable upset to one of our pupils, her family, and members of the wider community. We deeply regret the distress that this caused and offer our sincere and unreserved apologies. We've since spoken directly with the pupil and her family to listen to their concerns and reflect on how this could have been handled better. We are committed to learning from this experience and ensuring that every student feels recognised and supported when expressing pride in their heritage. At school, we are reviewing policies and strengthening staff training to ensure practices reflect our values of inclusion, respect, and understanding for all." What appears to be missing there as to what actually happened, or was it really just that she turned up in the Union Jack dress and was that it? Because there, as usual, there seems to be something missing there. I don't know if it's just me that's missing the point here, but there certainly seems to be something very slightly missing. But also another bizarre story is from the Telegraph. I won't read it out in full, it'll take too long, but schoolgirls as young as 11 forced to wear trousers and look like a boy is not embracing two genders equally. Again, I think this is a little bit silly. I think when we get to the point of questioning what girls are wearing at school, we've really gone too far down the wrong path. And finally, I knew there'd be a lot to get through in this video. One comment about this here, which was brought up by Robert Jenrick. He says, "An absurd decision which will infuriate the public," which I think he's right, and it's not a one-off. The immigration judge in this case, Rebecca Owens, he says is also behind other decisions that defy common sense. Now, again, without going into great detail about it, I have looked at it a little bit, but it says Palestinian uses ECHR to enter the UK for medical treatment. Now, as a general point of law, ECHR does not automatically and generally apply to everybody outside of the UK or EU, save unless there is a jurisdictional connection and an element that engages ECHR to make such a claim. In this case, I understand that it was argued that because it was an application for a visa coming here, there was a tangential jurisdictional connection with the Home Office, with the UK, and denying it was infringing on one of those ECHR rights. I think that is a tangential and not universally accepted principle that engages jurisdictional relevance of ECHR for non-UK or non-EU citizens. I think this, again, is just another example which quite clearly illustrates that we are not, as a matter of fact, rather than law, in control of our borders. So this, coupled with the many, many thousands, 1,375 in 4 days alone, each of whom could make a similar complaint. And because they are here, they have a much stronger basis to make one of these ECHR claims and never, in fact, be removed, even if their asylum claim is refused. So as a matter of law, as a matter of fact, all of these things are at odds with each other. right down to come full circle. If you hold the view that any of these are putting Western culture under threat, be careful that you don't advocate discrimination or violence because they might label you a terrorist. So I hope that is insightful. Please do leave me your comments in the box below, carefully, obviously, because we are no longer a free speech state. We are only a state that has a less restricted free speech in this country, as according to the international grading for free speech. I find that really bizarre, but here we are. Please do subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.